We're going to start off with Jeremy Vaeni, and Jeremy, over a decade ago, had a spiritual energy awakening, and he decided to come back from that to help open people to the choiceless choice. I hope I don't have to say that very often. For his book called Urgency, and Jeremy is an award-winning writer and columnist for UFO magazine, and the author of I Know Why the Aliens Don't Like Me. So, please welcome Jeremy Vaeni. I'm just going to stay here.
Thank you. Howley has spiritual experience, moves to the Big Island, news at 11, right?
I'm going to raise this. I'm going to really have to raise it when Tom comes up.
And I'm going to sing into this if the jokes don't go over. So, it's weird to be me and to be standing here in front of you because I don't look the part of that introduction, certainly, and I oftentimes don't sound it. And that's, I think, probably why, if there's a reason it's important for a guy like me to have had an experience like that, I think it's because there's a lot of guys like me and gals like me who come from a generation of sort of cynical, funny, sarcastic people who don't think there's anything beyond that. So I speak that language, but I've had a different set of experiences, so I try to combine the two in my book. And basically what the experiences are, I was reading Jiddu Krishnamurti. Is anyone familiar with his work? Okay. So, oh great. So essentially Jiddu Krishnamurti is a man who was brought up in the Theosophy Society, which was sort of like, I don't know, like the Scientology of the 1800s. It was sort of this catch-all religious group that brought together different traditions from around the world and married them together. And then they came up with this, they had this guy, Charles Ledbetter, who was a clairvoyant, and he picked out of a crowd Jiddu Krishnamurti as a young boy and said, this boy is the next savior of mankind. Essentially he was plucked to be the second coming for the Theosophists. So they raised him that way because his father was a Theosophist. So he said, sure, go raise my kid. So they raised him to be the second coming. They had this whole religion around him, and his big Sermon on the Mount speech, as it were, was, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as any of this religious stuff. Tear it all down. Truth is a pathless land. That was sort of his famous catchphrase. And that's it. And so for the rest of his life, until I think 1986, he went around the world speaking about this stuff, and he formed schools in California. So that was Krishnamurti, basically saying truth is a pathless land. This guy got it. This guy got it, and on his deathbed said, nobody in my lifetime has understood a word I've said. And it's interesting because now you can see on YouTube, you go back and you watch these videos of him with people like Hussein Smith, and, just seminal figures, David Bohm, a physicist. And they get it somewhat intellectually, but they don't get it. It's like they don't get what he's saying because there's a nuance to what he's saying. And essentially what he's saying is that there's no such thing as consciousness evolution. There is total transformation or not. And I guess sort of what I've added to that, not added to that, but what I've understood from that is that when you have an experience that is the totality, when you have the experience of the all, when you come back to normal and you try to talk to people about it, you're normal. You're normal again, and you're trying to take this timeless thing and you're trying to fit it into time. You're trying to take this, this monster of an experience that was just you, and you're trying to make it conceptual. And so when you do that, you end up breaking it down into things like morality, into things like parables, into, all the stuff that we know and love from religious traditions, or from gurus, or from any of this stuff, or meditation, or yoga. If anyone does yoga, I'm sure everybody here pretty much does yoga or meditation or some sort of form of that. That all comes from this state of wholeness. In that state of wholeness, you're no longer just you. You are, if you want to put it pseudoscientifically, non-local. If you think of yourself as a localized entity going through time, in this state of the allness, that's just an aspect. And in that state, these things come to you. So if you've ever wondered where, for instance, acupuncture, yoga, meditation, where these things come from. These aren't invented things. These are things that come through you when you're open to them, essentially, when you're not you. But when you bring them back, when you become you again, you come off that mountaintop, and you try to talk to people about it, it breaks down into systems and rules and all this crap. And then that's what we live by. And then we try to achieve that, right? And we try to go, okay, how do I get there? How do I get that thing that this person just had? The sort of joke of it is, the paradox of it is, there is no how. It's just the dissolution of self, which is the part, leads you to the whole. Sort of become that. And Krishnamurti kept trying to explain this over and over and over again, and people just sort of were like, but how? And they couldn't get it. And I was sitting on my couch one day back in New York reading him, and I got it. And I got that, I think the thing that I got, that was sort of my final illusion, was that I am still me. I'm still this searcher, right? Like I've done the work. I've done all of the psychological work. I've done the spiritual work. And yet I still have an identity, and that identity is the guy who's going to get it. And I think this is the problem that a lot of sort of New Age people have, which is they think they're on a spiritual path. They think they're going to get somewhere. And because they're on that path and say their neighbor isn't, they think that makes, that there's something transcendent about that, and there isn't. The path is an illusion too. The path is you. And so when I got that, when I was like, okay, I'm now the guy who's like sitting on a couch reading Krishnamurti trying to get it, that's when it sort of went off. The light bulb went off. And then I don't want to do any spoilers for the book, but that's when a whole new thing took over. And I saw this thing up close and personal. I had the big sort of I am experience. It wasn't right away, it was through a process. But in any event, so that happened. And so when it happened, I immediately knew that I had a choice, which was, do you dissolve into that, or do you come back to normal and talk about it? And I decided to come back to normal and talk about it. And I don't know how real that choice is. Maybe there isn't really one. But it certainly felt like there was one. And so that's what I did. So my contention is, or I guess my question is, and what I try to do in this book, is ask, is that something, that I amness, that big all experience, is that something that is just an experience that you visit and then come back from? Or is it actually a stage of consciousness? Is it the next thing that we're supposed to actually be? Is this what humans are for? Are we to be the part that reflects the whole, that invites the whole into the world? And if we are and we're not doing it, well, then what are we doing here? So I try in the book to make an experiment where I'm trying to shut up the brain, essentially the reader's brain. And I'm sorry I'm nervous, but I'm used to public speaking, but not usually about this. It's usually about sillier things. So I'm trying to shut up the reader's brain by just giving all these sort of epiphanies and insights that came to me during the course of this, because part of what happens when you become healthy, if you want to put it that way, which is ironic, I'm not exactly dieting, but when you become healthy, you get intellectual as well as spiritual, as well as, psychological, situations where these things come to you. So I put them down on paper and I said, okay, I'm going to put these on paper. I'm going to give you no wiggle room. As a reader, you're going to have no wiggle room. Your brain is going to see these things and go, that's better than what I had. That's actually more true than what I just knew about life, the universe, and everything. And so if that holds, then maybe the brain chatter stops. Maybe the brain chatter stops, and maybe you have that moment where the light bulb goes off, and something new takes place. Probably not. Probably a failed experiment, because again, we've had thousands of years of this, and practically nobody gets it. But someone's got to, damn it. And let me just give you one more just sort of concrete example of sort of that there's no evolution of consciousness. If you think about 2012, which is something I swore I'd never talk about, which is probably why I'm talking about it. If you think about the origin of the whole us being as white people, as Westerners, or whatever you want to put on that, taking this and being interested in it was decades ago. And it was that there is this date, 2012, December 21st. And like clockwork, something's going to happen on that date. Right? You remember this? This was the big thing. It's either going to be an extinction or, a spiritual upgrade or something. And then as it sort of came nearer, and it was like the 90s, we were like, well, maybe it's a process. Maybe it's not that date is specifically the thing that's going to happen. Maybe that's just sort of a marker. And then as it became even closer and it got into 2012, it's like, well, maybe that's happening right now, and we're all feeling it. And but there's also this 2021 or this 2016 or this 2030. We've also got this calendar wrong, maybe. Maybe we don't understand my calendar. All this stuff to sort of push it away and push it away. But that's not the point. The point is this, that the mindset that latches onto a 2012 type thing is the mindset that rebels against the church and the established order. And they go, we don't like that Judeo-Christian stuff. We don't like judgment. But they still have this seed, this kernel of that in them because that's our culture, right? And so we latch onto this thing and we make a judgment out of it. We keep pushing this judgment day forward and not acknowledging that that's what we're doing, creating this new sort of judgment day, by which we either evolve or go. And so, what is that an example of? It's an example of transference. It's not that the people who don't believe in orthodoxy are any more or less enlightened than the people who do. It's just simply that they've transferred one to the other. And that's how we keep going with this for another 1,000 years, for another 1,000 years. And I just wonder if we can get off that wheel. I don't think my book is going to get us there. I'm not that egocentric, but it's my shot anyway. So there's that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.